This is the Investor Connect podcast program. This is Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of the show, in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, private equity, family offices, and many other investor groups for startups and growth companies. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for joining us. Well, hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're here with Graham Foreman of Edovate Capital. Graham, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Hall.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into the venture world?
Yeah, I guess the way to sum up my experience and career is there have been three themes. They're education, entrepreneurship, and investing. So I actually started my career out of college working in the U.S. Senate. My first job was for a former senator who was a leader on education and labor issues. Worked for him. When he retired, I moved out west, worked on some campaigns, and I ended up working for a guy who was a college president. We got him elected to the state legislature in California, and he quickly became chair of the education committee. So that first phase for me was really federal and state policy in education, and I developed an appreciation for the challenges that people face in education. So the second phase was as a startup entrepreneur, and going way back in my background, I grew up in a small business. My grandfather ran a business, and I started hustling in the business at about age 10 and had a great experience as a kid doing a bunch of different jobs. And so I knew I wanted a startup career. And so I started in software. And I had three startups. They were all software-focused businesses. Not surprisingly, they all served education. Our customers were schools, districts, colleges, and universities. They were all SaaS platforms. And in each of them, I led sales, I led marketing, I led business development in all of them. And along the way, I had my successes. I certainly had my entrepreneurial failures as well. But I had enough success, or I should say I was fortunate to have enough success to start angel investing a number of years ago. Did my first angel investment about 11 years ago. And then toward the end of the third business, I started thinking about what I could do next. And my idea was, why not invest and advise lots of education technology entrepreneurs as a way to scale my impact? And so I started Edovate about 4 years ago while I was still operating. And then we sold our third business, we sold to Vista Equity Partners in 2015. And I exited from that. And since then, I've been investing full-time in seed stage education technology entrepreneurs. So that's what I'm doing now.
So you started Edovate Capital. What's the investment thesis behind it? Obviously, it's to help the educational technology world, but what are you looking for when you make investments through that channel?
Yeah, I think, first of all, a primary point to my thesis is I believe fundamentally that education is going to change more in the next 30 to 40 years than it has in the last 1,000. If you look at school, even when I was growing up, it was very much, I would call it sort of a factory or an industrial model, where you have a teacher who's teaching to a class of maybe 25 or 30 students. They're all going over the same material at the same pace. It's being delivered in the same way. That's the model that we've used for really centuries now. And technology, I think, fundamentally creates some opportunities for us to rethink school and do it in a different way. And I want to be a part of that. Now, that's core to my thesis, is there's a lot of opportunity. And as I look across technology, many sectors of our economy have been changed dramatically by technology. When you think about how we buy things online, when you think about the financial world and other industries, one of them that's not changed as dramatically is education. But I think its time has come. And so what I look for, typically, this is not a general rule, but I look for really promising software entrepreneurs that have found a real problem, primarily within K-12 education, and they can build repeatable, scalable software businesses to solve those problems. And so I tend to actually be attracted to problems that have been overlooked by other entrepreneurs. And in education in the U.S., there's lots of opportunity for those types of pockets, if you will, within education where people can build very successful, $50 million businesses. And that's what I look for.
What are some of the pockets or problems that you're seeing out there that you think are the low-hanging fruit? What gets you excited when a deal comes in that goes after one of those areas? And maybe you could tell us a little bit more about what those areas are.
Yeah, well, as I was thinking the other day about this and thinking about the last, say, 3 or 4 investments that I've done, one common theme is they all revolve around human capital. And I think fundamentally education is very much a human capital business, but within education, there are real shortages of human capital. When you think about teachers, in some places, there simply aren't enough teachers for certain roles. Substitute teachers are in short supply in many markets. Science, math, computer science in K-12, which is a topic that is growing in demand. There are real human capital shortages there. And I think that presents some real opportunities. So that's one area as an example. I'll give you a specific example. Right now, I'm looking for a really promising entrepreneur that can address the demand in K-12 for more computer science teaching. There are lots of tools available for students to be able to use in computer science or to learn how to code, if you will. But there's a real shortage of people focused on the problem of how do we create more qualified teachers to be able to teach computer science. And the demand right now for computer science teachers that are ready far outweighs the supply right now. So I look for those kinds of imbalances and real problems that entrepreneurs can solve where there are not a lot of people currently focused on solving that problem.
Well, in the last few years, there was the rise of for-profit coding schools, and it seemed like that really took off and went up a ways, and then there was consolidation, and then it went back down. What was your take on the for-profit coding schools, and what did they do well, and what was lacking in that model?
Well, I'm familiar with some of them, and I think part of the challenge is a scalable, repeatable business model for them. Many of them were catering directly to students, so it was a consumer model, and sources of funding to go very far in that consumer market, I think, are limited because there aren't as many financial aid options for students. Those programs tend to be quite expensive, particularly for students that may just be starting out in their careers. And what I've noticed is some of them, in fact, some of the leaders in that space have shifted more to a B2B model. So finding companies that demand coders and a steady supply of coders and being able to create programs that tailor to the skills that those companies are looking for. And then the companies end up paying most, if not all, the fees for the programs. I think that model is more stable and more predictable going forward. And I've seen some leaders in the space, Galvanize being one of them, that's moved towards that type of model. So sum it up, I think they're still figuring out their business models in some cases.
And what are some other pocket areas aside from the computer science teaching element? Where else are you seeing opportunity?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the areas that I'm really getting into now, where I think there is an opportunity, and it's not a new opportunity, but it's an opportunity without enough solutions, is actually the literacy market. So everybody in K-12 education, whether you're sort of the old school or you're the new school, everybody believes that literacy is important. But when you look at proficiency rates by third grade, a child's ability to read at grade level is one of the single best predictors about whether or not they're going to be successful in college. This is in third grade. And today we still have 65% of third graders do not read at grade level, despite all the different approaches there. So I recently backed a company that has a novel approach to actually help these developing readers become more proficient readers with the help of the technology platform and a volunteer, like a peer, a parent, any family member for that matter, that can help them develop into readers. So again, that's kind of another human capital challenge as well, because there are literacy coaches and reading specialists that work with these students, but they're very expensive and they're in short supply. So if you can tap into a volunteer workforce and help them have a scaffolded approach to support students, then you've tapped into a huge labor pool that can really help these developing readers. So that's another area. Literacy is another area that I'm excited about.
We've seen quite a few educational deals come through, but sometimes the investors point to the lack of IPOs and successful exits around education. And in the early days, it seems like anybody can get some revenue from an educational technology or platform, but getting critical mass or scale seems to be the challenge. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I like to tell entrepreneurs that if it was easy to scale distribution in K-12, everybody would be doing it well, but it's hard and sales cycles are longer. The revenues in terms of the funding that's available, it's significant, but it can be hard to come by. I mean, my general take, right, is there are always going to be certain needs that a superintendent or a cabinet official has at a school district, and those needs do change. But if you can solve a must-have need, literacy being one of those, if you can solve that and help them with some of the challenges that they have, there are steady streams of revenue. There are title dollars that are big pools of funding that can pay for innovative solutions that address some of those pressing problems. And those can be very, very good businesses over time. They might not scale as quickly as maybe a consumer business might, but they can be very stable. They renew at a very high rate, those district, school and district customers, and they can be marvelous businesses over time. There are lots of pockets in education where you've got a $500 million to $1 billion market, and there's an opportunity for a $50 million business.
Would you consider yourself an impact investor with Edovate?
I would. Impact means different things to different people. My own definition of impact and what I look for is I look for entrepreneurs and solutions that can deliver real student outcomes or can empower teachers and administrators in some way broadly. And they can grow to serve millions of students or hundreds of thousands of teachers and administrators. So it's a pretty broad definition, but my core belief is that if you solve problems for students that deliver student outcomes, or you empower teachers and administrators to be more effective and efficient, there's a good business opportunity there. You're going to be working with schools for a long time if you can deliver on that.
Well, as an impact investor, what would you consider your impact metric to be if you had to put one down?
Well, it depends. I think, a broad way to think about that is how many students are you able to reach? How many teachers and administrators are you able to serve? That's an easy one. I think another one is, are you serving at least a cross-section of, sort of, if you think about the demographics, students and of schools, are you serving schools that at least reflect the national free lunch factor, which is a rating of sort of economics within schools? So if you're doing that, then clearly you're serving a broad section of students. I also would add to that for many solutions, to me, impact actually shows that they can move the needle in terms of student outcomes. So I have several companies that I backed that are able to deliver 2 or even 3 years of growth in terms of student scores in particular subject areas when those solutions are used for a year. So students that are behind and they use these technologies, they can catch up to grade level or even get ahead. So that's another way to measure impact. But that only works with classroom-facing solutions, not back-office solutions.
Well, we're seeing healthcare move from a cost-plus model to a value-based outcome model. Do you think we'll see the same thing in the educational marketplace?
I would love to see something similar in the education marketplace. I think one of the investments that I have actually is in a company called Learn Platform that's trying to do something like that. It's trying to essentially demonstrate to school district leaders efficacy around the education technology solutions. So it's trying to answer the question, does it work and who does it work for and under what circumstances does the technology work? So this, if successful, this would shift the conversation from buying based on anecdotes of people that like the technology to actually people buying the technology because it works for certain students under this set of circumstances. That's exciting to me because that should help improve the procurement process when you're able to create more transparency around that.
If you were a CEO of an ed tech company and they said, we'll pay you if our students do higher on the scores at the end of the program, would you be signing up for that?
Yeah, that's a fair question, Hall. Not everybody is excited about the microscope being shined on the work that they're doing. I think there are probably going to be some winners and losers when it comes to looking closely at that data, but I think it's the right direction to go in. And I just think it benefits the industry as a whole. If you really have data that shows, my technology works for this group of students under these circumstances, as a buyer, aren't you going to be more enthused? Shouldn't that remove some of the friction in the buying process? At least that's the thesis.
Well, that's great. In the last minute or two that we have here, what else should we cover that we haven't so far?
Well, I would just say anybody who's interested in education technology, I would say it's important to think about investing in a series of investments and take a portfolio approach. So that's what I've done. When I set out to do this, I wanted to be sure I'd be able to do dozens of investments, to be able to diversify, and I'm well down that road. And I think that's critical. I'm very bullish on this industry in the long run. I think it's ripe for change. The digital tracks have been laid, so to speak, within schools, and there are more and more promising solutions that are coming out. So I just encourage people to consider it and consider making multiple investments if they're serious about education technology.
Well, that's great. So what's the best way for people to reach you?
Yeah, they can email me or they can visit my website. So website it's Edovate Capital. That's EDOVATE capital.com. And my email is just Graham, GRAHAM @edovatecapital.com. Love to hear from folks.
That's great. We'll put that in the show notes so people can see that and reply back if they have any questions or notes for you as well. But I appreciate you taking time today and hope to have you back in the future for another discussion.
Paul, it's my pleasure. Thanks so much for the opportunity.